welcome to this ANCHISE webinar. So just before we start, let me just share with you some, little instructions. Please make sure that your microphone is muted so that we can ensure the best quality of the sound. You will find a chat. The chat is at your disposal to ask any questions all along the meeting, but you will have a dedicated moment to share questions, and we will be able to discuss and to answer as far as possible at the end of the meeting.
Progress.
Just as I said, yes. Please, hello. Please, yes. Welcome on board. Could you please make sure that your microphone is muted? Everyone, please mute yourself so that we can ensure the best quality of the sound.
Just muted, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So just as I said, we will have a dedicated moment for questions. So feel free to use the chat to share your question and we will answer as fast as possible. And now I will be pleased to give immediately the floor to Professor Véronique Jankowski, who is the head of the French School at Athens and ANCHISE project coordinator, for the introduction. Véronique, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marine. So, dear colleagues, thank you very much for joining us today for this third ANCHISE Talk webinar. So I'm the director of the École Française d'Athènes and the coordinator of the ANCHISE project. If you're joining us for the first time, you may know that ANCHISE stands for Applying New Solutions for Cultural Heritage Protection by Innovative Scientific, Social and Economic Engagement. It is a Horizon Europe project, which is dedicated to the fight against illicit looting and trafficking of cultural goods in Europe. And we started in early 23 for 3 years, along with 2 other projects of the same cluster. And we aim at offering comprehensive and replicable solutions, matching the needs of the professionals of all fields involved in this fight. ANCHISE as a project is also following the results from our previous Horizon 2020 project, Nature, that some of you may already know and may have participated in. So in order to understand and include a very rich community, we constituted a joint initiative, and ANCHISE involves 15 partners from all over Europe and also a users board, which is constituted and including scholars, practitioners from law enforcement services and practitioners from cultural heritage services, but also technological tools developers and community managers. And among the numerous actions of ANCHISE, the project intends also to carry an extended research work in order to understand better the social, political, and economical context of the looting and illicit trafficking of cultural goods. And in this order, the scholars whom we are listening to during the ANCHISE talks are experts of the phenomenon as well as in the solutions that we intend to develop against it. So the speakers we're delighted to be introducing this evening are PhD student Benjamin Omer and Dr. Marine Leschenau. Benjamin Omer is a PhD candidate in law from the University of Lyon. He's working on the laundering of the proceeds of archaeo-terrorist offenses, and he previously worked at UNESCO as a project officer. He also is a member of the ANCHISE Young Researchers Committee, and he has, as you may understand, a long experience in this topic. The discussion will be driven by Marine Leschenau. Marine Leschenau holds a PhD in protohistoric archaeology. She's a member of the ANCHISE Consortium as a project manager for the French National Police College, and she's also an associate researcher as an archaeologist at the ISOMA laboratory in Lyon and a lecturer at the University of Lyon. Her research focuses on Corsica and the Tuscan archipelago from the early Iron Age to the Romanization, and she also managed previously several European projects, and she was the project manager of the Nature project in the framework of Horizon 2020. So we're very grateful to both of you and to have the opportunity to hear both of you and to discuss together these excellent topics, the role of the antiquities market in criminal money laundering. And as it was explained just a few minutes before, we will have the discussion after the presentation of Benjamin Omer. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Véronique. I don't know, Marine, if you want to say something more before I start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Véronique, actually, as well. And the floor is yours, Benjamin.
Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen without messing everything up. So can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Véronique. Thank you, Marine. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar for the ANCHISE project, which I'm a little bit part of. And today I will be speaking about the role of the antiquities market in criminal money laundering. So it's a huge topic. It's a complicated and very deep topic. So I took the opportunity to talk today just to lay out some key definitions, key elements about this topic. We're gonna not dive into very specific parts of this topic, but just to give you a quick overview of what is money laundering and the laundering offense in general in the art market. So we're gonna go with 4 key elements. The first one is gonna be linking the laundering to the illicit trafficking of cultural property. Then we're gonna dive into 2 specific realization of the laundering within the art market and within the trade of antiquities in general. And then we're gonna talk about some regulatory challenges, and hopefully you will have several questions about this full topic. So, diving in a little bit too fast. Diving in our first topic, so I want to quickly make an overview and connect the offense of laundering to the illicit trafficking of cultural property. So as you all know, I assume, even if you come from very different backgrounds in this webinar, the illicit trafficking of cultural property consists mainly of the import, export, and illicit transfer of ownership of cultural items. So this is the definition of the illicit trafficking from the 1970 UNESCO Convention. And I'm not going to dive on all the topics of the illicit trafficking, but let's say that today we cannot estimate how many antiquities are being trafficked in the world. Sometimes we hear let's say approximation about it, and we say that the illicit trafficking is the third most profitable traffic in the world. The fact is we don't have any idea of the size of the illicit antiquities market, but we have an idea on how it operates and how it works. And sometimes we can, when we are lucky, find some trafficked goods with the help, of course, of law enforcement agencies. So just to give you an idea, maybe you already know about these figures, but if you take just only one operation happening every year with the cooperation of law enforcement agencies in Europe and under the supervision of Interpol, you can see that each year we seize a lot of cultural items that are being trafficked, and we also arrest a lot of traffickers participating in this criminal phenomenon. So we have a phenomenon of illicit trafficking. We have some figures, we have some insights on how many objects are trafficked, even if we can't give a precise estimation. And we also have an idea of how it operates. So as I'm sure you already know, when we have to give a structure of the illicit trafficking, we start from the source, from the first offense related to cultural property, being looting or theft in most cases. So this offenses happens in source countries, any country can be a source country. France can be one. Italy is a big one as well. But also we are talking about states that are facing harsh difficulties, being economical, being conflicts, and so on. So when objects are being taken illegally from the ground or from an institution, then they are transited to circulate around the world. So they are handled regionally and then transnationally. And we can see at this point that a form of organized crime is already happening. And the main goal of this illicit trafficking is to put the illicit object in the art market, meaning in the legal art market, because the objective of traffickers is to maximize their profits. It's as simple as that. And they can pass the object from an illicit source to a legal market. So this is why I want to highlight that in the illicit trafficking of cultural property, there is a need to launder, meaning that for the traffickers, the sole objective of the trafficking is to make the most money out of it. And how you do that, you take one object and you put it on the legal market. So to conclude on this quick overview of the link between laundering and the illicit trafficking, we can say that the antiquities market has a specificity because its position, criminologically speaking, is between a black market and a white market. And it differentiates it from the drug trafficking or weapons trafficking. When you are trafficking drugs, the possession of drug is illicit, the transporting of drugs is illicit as well, the consummation. So all is happening in a black market. In the antiquities market, it's the opposite. You take an object from the black market and you try as much as you can to put it in the legal market. So to keep in mind that laundering is a key factor in the illicit trafficking of cultural property. But what is laundering exactly? I'm sure all of you have heard the term, and you might as well, if you are from a law enforcement agency, apply it in your day-to-day work. But just to give you a broad definition of the laundering, so you can see this is the definition of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, the Palermo Convention, and you have, let's say, two main acts of laundering. The first one is mostly an active way to launder illicit proceeds. So you commit a crime, you have illicit proceeds, and then you try to convert or transfer them in order to legalize the proceeds of a crime that resulted from the original offense. So this is the active converting, active transferring of assets, criminal assets. You have a second kind of laundering, which is more of a passive laundering. It's the only fact of justifying, of giving a justification to illicit proceeds. So if you try and help someone launder illicit proceeds, you just have to write a justification or to fake a document, and you are already facing criminal penalties if you are being caught because you are committing the offense of laundering. So just to characterize a little bit more this offense of laundering, first of all, we can say that it is a dual offense, as we've just seen. So you have the active laundering and the act of facilitation, justification. Then we have also to say that it's a consequential offense. For money laundering to be characterized, it needs to be related to a first offense. So in the illicit trafficking world, the first offense will be theft, looting, illicit export or import, and laundering is the second step, let's say. The first step is having these proceeds, and the second one is to launder them. And of course, laundering, that's why I'm saying laundering from the beginning and not money laundering in order to not confuse you. Laundering can happen with any proceed of a crime. So it can be a material object as an artwork or an archaeological object, or it can be money, but it's not only applicable to money. So it can happen and be characterized within the illicit trafficking world. So, as I said, I'm going to open many doors. I'm not going to give specific answers to the many topics of the laundering within the art market because we only have mostly half an hour. But what we're going to see is laundering happens in two ways in the art market. The first one being laundering of cultural property, and the second one being laundering through cultural property. We're going to see this one in more or less 5 or 10 minutes, but let's start with the laundering of cultural property. So what is it? The laundering of cultural property is the laundering of the provenance of art and antiquities. So it's what I described in the first link I made between illicit trafficking and laundering. It's the fact that you have an illicit object and you are trying to legalize it in a way to give it an appearance of legality in order for the object to go into the legitimate art market. So this kind of laundering mostly concerns archaeological items and or antiquities. In some legislation, archaeological items and antiquities are differentiated. So it can be the same thing for you if you are coming from an historical or archaeological background, but it concerns mostly this kind of object. And why? Because it's the easiest objects to fake a provenance by providing fake documentation and so on and so on. And it's easier to do that with this kind of objects than with, let's say, contemporary artworks or famous artworks. It concerns not only valuable items. We have some research proving that even the low value and small items are being laundered in order to enter the art market. And the predicate offenses, if you remember what I just said before, in this case is theft, looting, or illicit export or import in most of the cases. So how is it happening in the art market, this laundering of cultural property? I'm not going to dive into all the specifics, all the methods, all the vulnerabilities of the art market to it, but I'm just going to give you a quick example. I'm pretty sure most of you have already seen this object. It made the international headlines when the cases broke. So this is the Nejamank sarcophagus, which was found, which was looted, but found in a way, in the Menia region in Egypt in 2011, more or less, so during the Arab Spring. And this object was looted and it had quite a specific story. So it was looted in Egypt in 2011. Then it went to United Arab Emirates to be stored and photographed. And then the photos were sent directly to brokers and dealers in Paris and in all of the art marketplaces in Europe to see if they were interested in buying it. One of them did, a French fellow man who had an art gallery in Paris. So he bought the sarcophagus and imported it in Germany in order to give it a restoration. So it was given a quick and pretty good restoration in order to make it appear the most beautiful possible. Then it was exhibited in France, and finally it was acquired by the Metropolitan Museum in New York in 2017. So you can see that this object from an undoubtedly illegal provenance traveled all around the world, in the Arabian Peninsula, in Europe, in North America, without a problem until arriving in America. And how can this happen? And how can nobody notice that this piece was in fact looted and laundered through all its voyage? So what happened is quite easy. In the first instance in Egypt, it was provided with a first fake provenance documentation. And this first fake provenance documentation was given to it in order for the object to be able to cross the borders between Egypt and United Arab Emirates. Then in this country, it was provided with this first customs official documents based on the fake provenance document. Then in Germany, it was restored. So in the first two steps, it's a classical laundering with using fake documentation. But in this instance, the restoration is playing a key part in the laundering as well, because in this case, the object was given what we call a museum appearance, making it seem the more legit possible, and also, interesting for the traffickers, increasing its value. In the fourth step, it benefited from the reputation at the time of the art market participants who bought the sarcophagus because he was a prominent dealer in the Parisian market, and so nobody was suspecting him of illicit trafficking, and his reputation only, it's not an act of laundering per se, but benefited to the object to be to have the credibility and the appearance of legality. And then the object arrived in the US, and it was acquired by one of the most famous institutions in the world, the Metropolitan Museum of New York. So it gave a final seal of reputation to this object. If the museum were to sell it 5 or 10 years later, nobody is going to, you know, check the provenance of an object coming from the Met. So hopefully the object was spotted by the American authorities. They checked the provenance and they realized that the object was of, to say the least, dubious provenance. So this is an example of what laundering looks like in the art market and what laundering, how laundering is done, kind of, it's a way of saying it, but because you can see on the left side of the slide, it's the actual advertisements that were put it online in order to sell the sarcophagus. So you can see that there is quite a story to this object. We know today that it was looted in 2011, but the dealer, this art dealer, and all of the traffickers built a kind of a narrative for the object, a history of provenance for the object. It was legally exported in 1971. Then it was acquired by some dealer in Switzerland. It stayed in the family for many times. So we know this story is fake, and the Met should have known that this story was fake, because in the documentation provided with the object, there was a simple and key mistake. When they wrote the fake certificates of exportation, they made a huge mistake when they issued it with the Egyptian Republic's name, because until 1971, Egypt was the United Arab Republic with Syria, and in 1971, it became the Arab Republic of Egypt. So they took the wrong one to write the export certificate, which is a gross mistake. We can even say a rookie mistake, and it was spotted that way. So if the Met or any other participant in this, in the voyage and the travel of this object was doing his due diligence and was verifying the provenance to see if the object was of illicit provenance, they could have spotted it quite easily. So there is other ways. So I told you about fake documentation, restoration, benefiting from the reputation of prominent art dealers. But you have many other ways to facilitate the laundering of cultural property within the art market. You have, I'm sure you've heard of it as well, the use of free ports. I cannot dive again in this topic because it's a huge one, but they are being used for storage, fake documentation, but also repeated sales. And they are being sold many times, the pieces, within the free ports, and it gives documentation, a history to the object. Also, you have the use of offshore trust and, let's say, shell companies, complicated tax havens, structures that are being used to give a distance between the object, the buyer, and the illicit provenance. And also you have the intervention of complicit intermediaries and experts. They're going to play a role in establishing fake documentation, for example, fake certificate of provenance, fake certificates of authenticity. So they play a key part in this laundering process. If laundering is happening in the art market, it's because the art market itself is vulnerable to it. So how is it vulnerable? First of all, this is not my saying, the FATF, the UNESCO, and many other institutions, and even some art market participants are saying that there is a lack of transparency in the art market, which comes from a long tradition of not wanting to publish everything related to the objects that are being sold on the market, which sometimes can be understandable, but which gives a way for traffickers to exploit it. And this lack of transparency comes also with the use of shell companies and so on. You have actual difficulties in establishing provenance. Sometimes, even when we get back an object, we cannot say for sure where this object is coming from. Sometimes it was exported many decades ago and we do not have a paper trail. So this is an actual difficulty, which is not on the sole responsibility of art market participants, but it is a problematic within this topic. Then, of course, we have complicit or maybe passive art market participants that do not do what they are supposed to do in terms of provenance check. And we have weak provenance obligations within the legal system in Europe. And I will get back to that in the last part of our webinar. So there is laundering of cultural property, meaning laundering of the provenance of an object in order for it to enter the legal market. But we have also another phenomenon of laundering in the art market, which is laundering through cultural property. So this is what we can call classical money laundering. So you have in your possession illicit money coming from previous offenses that you've committed, and you need a way to give this money an appearance of legality to use it in other purposes, to buy whatever you want to buy with your money. So this process is not different as other types of money laundering. It mostly concerns the most valuable objects, because in the art market, contrary to other forms of trade, you can launder a huge sum of money buying a valuable object in one single instance. So this is very interesting if you are looking to, I'm not giving advices, but if you are looking to launder a lot of money, the art market, unfortunately, is a good place to do it. The predicate offenses of this money laundering of this money laundering process are all of the offenses you can think of that makes money. So it can be drug trafficking offenses, tax evasion, tax avoidance, fraud, and so on and so on. So there is no specificity in terms of committing money laundering on the art market. So this infographic gives you a proper scheme, a simple one of laundering illicit money through cultural property. You have dirty money, you buy some works of art. If you are lucky, the art dealer is not going to check where your money is coming from. Then you have a piece of art that you can sell, maybe, and launder your money that way. Or maybe you can take a loan against the art piece that you just bought, and your money is laundered as easily as that. So as for the laundering of cultural property, laundering through cultural property is happening in the art market because of some of its vulnerabilities to it. So the first one, I already mentioned it, it's the existence of high value goods, when you can launder high sums of money in one single instance. You have also a tradition of cash payments within the art market, where you can buy you can spend vast sums of money in cash with, let's say, not sufficient checks. And you also have the lack of transparency we mentioned before, the use of offshore or tax haven to do this kind of operations. And you have one key specificity of the art market for this type of laundering, which is the pricing volatility and subjectivity within the art markets. As you all know, sometimes it's very difficult to appraise, to evaluate an art object, and this kind of pricing differences can be exploited in money laundering schemes with under or overvaluation of some art pieces. It's a complicated schemes. Maybe I can get back to it later, but we can talk about it in the Q&A session, but it's a specificity of the art market. So entering our last, I'm trying to go as quick as I can on the topic, our last part of the webinar. Just to recap, we saw that laundering is quickly, let's say, a key offense in the illicit trafficking of cultural property. Is the only offense making it possible to maximize the profits of stolen art pieces. We have laundering of cultural property of provenance happening in the art market. We also have laundering through cultural property, or classical money laundering, as I call it, happening in the art market. But how is it happening? Why is it happening? And do we have enough regulation in place to counter this phenomenon? So just talking about the European Union, the art market participants, all of the art market participants, are submitted to what we call anti-money laundering and terrorism financing obligations. So we have a lot of legislation pertaining to the AMLTF regime. And the last one, there's a new one upcoming, but the last adopted one and enforced one is the 5th European Union Anti-Money Laundering Directive. And under this text, the art market participants have to report suspicions if they enter a business relationship and there is some red flags showing up. They also have to perform what we call customer due diligence if a transaction or a business relationship is above 10,000 euros. And they also have to adopt a risk-based approach, meaning that they have to assess the risk of money laundering within their practice and act accordingly to prevent this form of laundering to happen. So this is the obligations that hard market participants have to respect when they are conducting business. What we are seeing in the practices of the art market, and I don't want to generalize it, I'm talking about some participants of the art markets, not all the art market participants, fortunately, we can notice a lack of suspicion reports transmitted to the authorities. I will show you an example just right after. We can see as well known or low provenance research on the objects. You do not only have to check the clients, but maybe you can check as well the objects that are being transacted. And there is a difficulty pertaining to small businesses, because when you have an art gallery with 2 or 3 employees, sometimes I reckon it's very difficult to respect all of the money laundering obligations, and it can be a difficulty for some art market participants. But what we can notice is also a form of reluctance of some of the art market participants to abide by the AMLTF regulations. So on the left side of the slide, you can see that's the suspicion report transmitted by the art market participants to the French authority. And even if you can see an increase of 50% of 49.3% between 2022 and 2023, it's only the fact that the most regulated participants of the French art market, because we have a progressive system, that are participating in the transmission of suspicion reports. You can see in the second categories, I'm sorry it's in French, but I'm going to try to translate it. For the classical art dealers in 2023, they only transmitted 3 suspicion reports. And the French art market is a multi-million industry. So maybe it should be, and it's not my opinion, it's the opinion of the French regulator, it should be way more suspicion reports transmitted to them. On the right side of the screen, we can see that it was quite an innovation, because 2 art galleries were sanctioned last year for the violation of the AMLTF regulations. So you can see a list of their violations, but for example, they sold to clients based in tax havens such as Panama, a classical one. They also sold art pieces for a lot of money without doing any check on the clients. So repeated violations like that are happening in the market, not for all participants, but for some participants. We can also see reluctance of the art markets towards better or stronger legislation. So as you can see, in between 2018 and 2021, the United States of America were considering to put the art market within the AMLTF obligations, because it's not the case today. And they were considering following kind of the European example. So the art market deployed $2.5 million to try and lobby their way out of this regulation. And what we can say about it is today, the Bank Secrecy Act, so the AMLTF regulation, was not extended to the art markets. Maybe it will be in the upcoming years. The same happens, but with a lot less money in Europe. So I'm not going to dive into it, but some art market participants tried to influence 2 key regulations in Europe. The last one was the new AMLTF package and the 6th European directive upcoming in the next month. To highlight, and I'm going to stop about that, but to highlight the reluctance of some art market participants to better comply and have stronger regulation about money laundering, you can see, and I think it's quite an interesting document for you to go and see in the UNESCO website. UNESCO did some consultation because it was in the process of revising its international code of ethics for dealers in cultural property, which is a soft law instrument with no obligation whatsoever, but just a declaration of intent of art market participants. And when you see the result of this consultation, I just put some highlights in this slide. You can see that the art market participant present to this reunion refused any kind of strengthening of these obligations, saying, for example, that traders should not be expected to systematically report suspicions pertaining to the provenance of objects. So this is some key issues, some key differences between researchers and the art market participants. So you can see that there is two lectures and two opinions about this kind of enforcing better regulation. But I don't want to conclude this presentation by being too pessimistic, because we have some regulation in motion. Back in 2017, the Council of Europe adopted the Nicosia Convention, which is in force today, and it was ratified only by 6 or 7 countries. And they created specific criminal offenses related to the laundering of cultural property within the art market. So they established the offense of placing illicit objects on the art market. So if you should have known by doing some background check or some provenance check that an object was illegal and you are placing it on the market, you can face criminal responsibility. The same goes for the falsification of documents. If you provide fake documents to enter the legal art market, you can face criminal charges. And the last innovation of this convention was to put in place the legal responsibility of legal entities such as companies or big institutions. We also have some interesting regulations at the national level. So you can see in 2016, Germany, I'm not going to try and pronounce the name of the law, but they implemented a law to better regulate the art market within their country, and they adopted a prohibition to introduce illegal objects to the art market. And they also introduced more due diligence and more provenance obligation to the art market participants. Italy, back only 2 years ago, when it was transposing the Nicosia Convention, also adopted a new regulation, and they adopted a key and important regulation, which is the Legge from the 9th March, which established an offense, criminal offense of laundering of provenance. So in the Italian law nowadays, you have a specific laundering offense related to the laundering of cultural property, and you can see that the sanctions are quite heavy, between 5 to 14 years in prison. And a last example is the USA, because they try to, as I told you before, revise their Bank Secrecy Act, and the Treasury of the USA is actually recommending to put the art market within the AMLTF obligations, but it's not happening for the next month at least. So this regulation in motion is not only from a criminal point of view. You can see art market participants trying to also better the transparency of the art market. So I just put you the examples of the guidelines for combating anti-money laundering that were edited by the Responsible Art Market Initiative. So they are trying to give kind of a roadmap, kind of advices to their members in order for them to conduct businesses and comply with the AMLTF regulation. So even in the art market, there is a movement trying to regulate their practices in an ethical way. And I think this is also very important to mention. key institutions in the fight against money laundering are also trying to help the art market participants better comply with the AMLTF obligations. So on the left side of the screen, you have an example of the French authorities trying to provide guidelines on how to do a risk-based approach, how to write a suspicion report. So they are giving the maximum information to the art market participants in order for them to be able to understand and to comply with the AMLTF regulation. On the right side, you have the FATF report on money laundering and terrorism financing in the art and antiquities market, which also provides some recommendation. One key element that maybe we can discuss, or maybe in my opinion, can be a way forward to better regulate the art market and to better ensure that, and especially laundering of cultural property, is not happening on the market, or at least is reduced, is establishing an object due diligence. I mentioned before that in the AMLTF regulation, you have a customer due diligence obligation where you have to check your client. What is his identity? Where does he come from? What's his address? And some basic information on that. And I think, in my opinion, and it's open to discussion, maybe we can implement an object due diligence obligation within the AMLTF system with a list of verification for the art market participants in order to make sure that objects are not being laundered within their practice. So I think I'm a bit, took a little bit longer than I expected, but just to sum up my presentation. So we saw that there is an illicit trafficking of cultural property. I'm not going to develop on that. We saw that laundering is a key part of the process of the trafficking, and that the art market is vulnerable to laundering of provenance of cultural property, and also to laundering through cultural property or classical, typical money laundering. We saw that there is regulation in place, but maybe it is not enough today, not enough obligations on the laundering of provenance, and also not enough compliance from art market participants, at least some of them. And in the future, we can hope for new AMLTF regulations for the art market, not only within the European Union, but maybe in America, or maybe in other important markets, to ensure that money is not laundered on the art market and that cultural property is not laundered on the art market. I thank you for your attention, and I think Marine will open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. It was a very interesting, very exhaustive also presentation, and thank you also for having kept this very, clear, despite of the fact that this is a huge topic. Well, yes, I will be more than delighted to share with you some questions, but of course, everyone feel free to share questions and remark in the chat. It's up to you. Well, my first question will be related to the art market. So how can, according to you, how can the art market maybe develop solutions to combat money laundering? Do you think that some solution can come from maybe technologies, or what do you think?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, I think the art market is doing some key work to combat money laundering. I think we always have the bad image of the art market in the illicit trafficking world, but I think, as I mentioned, for example, the Responsible Art Market Initiative, which is only awareness raising and providing tools to better understand the situation, is one key element that they can improve. And I think art market participants must be associated to any kind of discussion relating to money laundering, and also in institutions such as UNESCO, even if the outcome for me was not pleasant to read. But I think they are playing a role. And in talking about technology, this issue is for the biggest ones, the big art market participants, auction houses. They can implement some key elements with technology, such as implementing, with the help of researchers, some kind of blockchain, let's say, identity card for specific objects. But they cannot do it alone. I think they have to be in touch with researchers, with like many projects such as ANCHISE or Nature, and I think, yeah, they have a key role to play. They are playing it for some parts, and there is always room for improvement.
Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks also for mentioning technologies such as blockchains and ID cards. We have one question in the chat from Italy. The question is, why exists a lot of regulation in every countries and not exit one for all countries? Actually, it led me also to another question that I had about, key challenges in international cooperation. But of course, the floor is yours.
Yeah, but I think it's an excellent question. I ask myself this question every day. But well, do you want me to give a diplomatic answer or a sincere one? Because just to be clear on this topic, we are doing everything we can, I think, in the European Union level. And the key problem is that money laundering issues are not an exclusive competence of the European Union. So each country has to transpose the European directives in their own national law. And sometimes it can lead to strengthening the national law. Sometimes it's a dubious transposition. So this is even in the European Union level, it's already a key problem. And if the question was more, why not implement an international convention, let's say, on the money laundering, it exists. There are several texts that deals with money laundering, but it's an issue of sovereignty. So when you talk about criminal money laundering, you talk about criminal offenses, you talk about harmonizing penal law, and it's a matter of sovereignty. And not many countries want to keep their say in how they regulate these kind of offenses in their own national legislation. So it's very, very complicated. I don't know if I answered the question correctly, but.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. May I also ask you if you can share some ideas with us today about the reality nowadays of the financing of terrorism through antiquities trafficking. Could you please address a little bit this also huge topic for us?
It's a huge topic because it's a controversial one. The thing is, and I have to side on the market's position on this issue. We do not have many proof that some terrorist groups, aside from Daesh in between 2014 and 2017, are making money out of the illicit antiquities trafficking. We know that they made some money because we have certain proof of objects being handled or even looted by these terrorist groups, but we cannot estimate how much they got from it, because the money that is financing terrorism is the money of the first sale, and the first sale is happening between the borders of, if we take Daesh for example, between Syria and Lebanon, and that's it. And then the money that the object is going to make throughout the way is not going to go back to terrorism financing. So what I think about terrorism financing is it happens, for sure. That's the topic of my thesis. It's an important fact to put back the spotlight on the illicit trafficking and say it can even finance terrorism. But it's already a key problem of organized crime and a key problem of losing history and losing the memory and the context of some object. And I think if we can reinforce this issue because some terrorist groups benefited from it, it's a win-win situation for us, but we cannot say for certainty that we know exactly how much terrorist groups made from selling antiquities. But if I just can complement my answer, it would be interested to pursue some research into that and some actual research project, for example, in order to better establish what is the reality of this topic. And we lack research, as for many other topics in the illicit trafficking world. And yeah, we have to have more hard data. That's the key issue.
Yes, thank you. And as you were explaining and developing your ideas, more and more questions are coming in the chat. So I'm glad to share with you the next one. Across the EU, there is also different understanding in the terminology of art, antiques, and antiquities, as laundering takes place with all. Is there some agreement inside on a common terminology?
Well, the common terminology is the terminology of the legislation. So if you take any directive, if you take for example, the last directive of the import regulation of the illicit trafficking, illicit of the cultural property, I'm losing my words. So the regulation 2019-880, you can find definitions that should be applied. So you have the definition of what is cultural property, what is an antiquity, what is, and so on and so on. But the thing is, when you transpose this legislation in a national legislation, of course, you're going to have some difficulties. For example, we still have a debate between archaeological objects and antiquities. And some researchers are saying, yeah, but all archaeological objects are antiquities. So the distinction is not a good one. So I'm not an expert on this topic, but from a legal standpoint, we will always have different, let's say, different opinions of what a word is, and the EU legislation normally serves the role of harmonization, at least of the concepts. But even for laundering, if you go and check the French legislation and you compare it to the US legislation and compare it to the Chinese legislation, we'll see that laundering is not always understood as the same criminal behaviors, even if it's a recent topic, because it only came up in the, let's say, in the 80s. So it's quite a recent topic, and even with this one, we can have some disparities in the concepts.
Okay, thanks a lot. And regarding another question, should be more efforts be made to train customs officials at borders to recognize objects being transferred across borders?
So I'm not a customs specialist or a customs representative, so I don't want to undermine or to overstate the work that they are doing. I think there is customs are, and with the role of the World Customs Organization in many operations, joint operations, in the cooperation, in UNESCO, in every institution they are present. I did, for example, a training in Lebanon for law enforcement agencies in the region, and the World Customs Organization was present. I think they are doing what they can, but just to give you an idea, 90%, I think, of the international trade, all of the trade in the world, is happening through the sea and through boats, through huge tankers with a lot of containers, and only between 1% and 2% of the containers are checked by customs. And this concerns all of forms of trafficking. So even for drug trafficking, you can say, okay, there is drug on the street coming from, let's say, South America or other regions. So customs are not efficient. I think customs are doing whatever they can, and it's mainly impossible to check everything. But they could maybe do some more random checks, and maybe they can be better trained on how to identify cultural items. But I think it's a matter of, unfortunately, I don't want to be pessimistic, but it's a matter of when the object is in the art market, that's the point that we have to do background checks, because we are the experts. We have archaeological training for some of the participants, and that's the moment where we can say, okay, this object is from illicit provenance. We cannot expect the customs to stop all of the illicit trafficking happening. That's not realistic, in my opinion.
Thanks a lot. And we have also, I'm looking to the time because unfortunately, yes, we have still a few minutes. And another question in a chat. And this one, yes, what would be crucial to increase the awareness about this topic?
Well, I think the awareness is better raised with huge cases, like the Nedjamonk case that I mentioned, because it made the headlines. If you are curious about it, you can check online. You will see that Kim Kardashian played a key role in this case, for example. So this is a way to shed a light when, unfortunately, when a big case is breaking up, and we can see that this form of trafficking is happening. But I think what is a key process to raise awareness, even in the general public, when I have different discussions with people during my presentation or my classes at the university, it's to know that there is no criminal penalties in many countries in the world when you do not verify provenance of an object. So I think that when people start to understand that and to say, okay, but how can you place a dubious object within the market without facing criminal penalties? Because if you put a fake, I don't know, a fake medicine on the market, a fake food or a dubious food on the market, you are facing criminal responsibility. And it is not the case for the illicit antiquities. Of course, they are facing financial risks, because if the object is then restituted, they will lose money. But I think we need harsher obligation than that. So maybe spreading the knowledge of the weak provenance obligations that we have is one way forward to raise awareness.
Another question in the chat. Actually, we have two more questions, and I am so sorry. I would like to also to have one question to ask you something regarding research. What can research possibly do in this topic? But still, yes. Well,
should I answer
I don't know how far you can address this question with this specific topic of money laundering, but
I will be very quick, because I really need to take these questions. But in this topic, not only for money laundering, because I think we have to start from the standpoint of illicit trafficking. We do not have not efficient, but we do not have many research on this topic. We cannot give an estimate of how, even using sometimes methodologies from other disciplines such as economics. They have actual models to try to give an estimation of money laundering. In Canada, for example, they developed a model. Maybe we can try and apply it for the art market. We need hard research, hard data. We need to, for example, know how much illicit antiquities are coming in the market, even if it's impossible to do it in a certain way. But at least we can try to develop methodologies to have data and to say to the market, now that we have this hard data, what should we do about it? And if we do not have prominent data, we know, because we see the police operations, we are working in this topic. But I think it's a key element, and to answer the question, the previous question, it's also a key element to raise awareness. If tomorrow you publish some actual decent scientific figures about illicit trafficking, it's going to make the headlines. I'm pretty sure of it. So yeah, I think that's a essential topic.
Yes, and yes, still, when you were delivering your speech, I was thinking about all the field of provenance research, of course, provenance studies. That is, I would say, a field of research in itself, and exactly. It is huge, and it has definitely a key role to play in this topic. Yes, and well, I would like us to go back to the chat and to discover further questions. We have 3 more. It is 6 p.m., so I'm trying to see how far we can address everything. The first question is, during the wars, was possible to do for contrast the illicit trafficking? So I guess this question is bigger than the specific topic of today. But anyway, you can provide elements of
I think I did not understand fully the question. Can you repeat?
I can read, during the wars, what is possible to do for contrast the illicit traffic?
During the wars?
The wars, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try and see and read the question.
See how far you can connect also to, yes, the question, today's topic. And then 2 more questions, if I may.
Maybe let's go back to the other question, and I'll try to understand the question.
Okay, right. So the second one is, do you consider, but I guess that you provide many elements of answers, so maybe you will have to repeat some elements in this for this specific question. Do you consider that the actors in the art market do enough due diligence to verify the provenance before putting them up for sale? You consider that the statement regarding the authenticity of cultural goods made by the traders are quite correct?
Well, it's a key question as well. The thing is, I don't want to give I cannot give a general answer because of course I think first of all it should not be up to them. It should be there should be strong regulations in place to make them do it in any case. So this is not a question of who does what or who is a good art dealer or who is a bad apple. There should be stronger regulation and a stronger surveillance of these obligations. Because when you are in the banking business, I'm telling you, the regulation that you have under the AMLTF regime is quite strong, and you are under supervision of authorities directly. This is not happening for the art market. And I think, first of all, this should not be up to the art market participants. Then I think some of them do actual research, but there is a culture of not checking the provenance. There is also a culture of not publishing the provenance that they have. They have many documents, but they do not publish them because they want to hide some facts. And we should, I think, enforce that all the documents that they have in their possession should be advertised when they place on the market the object. So the regulations are not strong enough. And the art market participants, for some, are trying to dodge them and to create fake backgrounds. Some of them are committing criminal have criminal behaviors, such as laundering. The person I told you with the Benjamin sarcophagus is nowadays indicted for money laundering. So he played the game, he lost, he's currently facing prison. And some of them just do no provenance check because they don't have the time. I can understand that, but this shouldn't be happening again. And so we need to provide the art market with more regulation. We need to provide the art market with easier way to do their job. And also we need to punish those who don't do this job because they are complicit. So you have I think a variety I'm sorry, of behaviors from the art market participants.
Okay, thank you. And more details are provided in the chat regarding the question, the previous question about wars and the
Yeah, okay, I'm seeing it.
You can see it.
Yeah,
So, yes,
sorry for the
definitely.
difficulty to understand. My brain is starting to freeze a little bit, but this is not my work at all because I worked on illicit trafficking, so cultural trafficking in times of peace, or in, let's say, in times of not war. I think it's the best way to put it. So the topic of the cultural property in arms conflict is a totally different one. So I don't want to give a false statement on that because this is not my field of expertise. But what can be done and what is being done, for example, today for Ukraine, but it was also done in Palestine. In Ukraine, for example, people are using, but as in Syria, Marine, if you remember, or in Iraq, using satellite imagery to track everything, to see which site is being bombarded, which site is being looted, using satellite imagery. That's when I think this is a callback to the terrorism financing question as well, because when Daesh took control of some parts of Syria and Iraq, it was not accessible for researchers, or you have a prominent researcher, specialist of Syria, Emma Cunliffe. She's working for Blue Shield, so for the protection during armed conflict, but she could not access any sites, and she cannot do, even nowadays, an assessment of what happens in the sites in Syria and Iraq because she cannot access it. So we do not have access to raw data. So we have to go around it using maybe satellite imagery. And trust me when I say that very good researchers, I know one, Samuel Hardy, who is working hard for documenting what's happening in Ukraine, are trying to monitor it as best as they can.
And you mentioned data. We have also a comment regarding data and how we can, maybe a question related to the way we can obtain enough reliable data. Yes, maybe also, yes, feel free.
That's complicated, but that's why this kind of project like ANCHISE or NHR are for. You bring together some researchers and they will have some idea on how to obtain raw data. For example, on my field, which is the money laundering, there is a technique, a methodology called the gravity model, which has been developed by two economists, one from Australia and one from Germany, to estimate how much money is laundered within a single market, a national market. And it takes a lot of generic data. It takes a lot of work to gather data on the commerce, on the trade. And for the illicit trafficking, if you want to adapt, for example, this model to the laundering of provenance, it will take a lot of convincing some authorities to give us the data, a lot of work around raw data, for example, exportation and importation of antiquities. If you take all of the exportations from France to another country, and then you compare it to the importations reported in this country from France, sometimes you can notice discrepancies. And then you can identify that some illicit objects were declared not on the export, but in the import. So you have ways to start compiling data and then using a model to have some interesting data.
And maybe one, not a question, but a comment that I think is truly related to what we've discussed previously. A comment from Aurora Project. Welcome to them. Thank you for attending. Fostering dialogue and collaboration between museums and art dealers seems to be crucial to speed up the process of checking the provenance.
Exactly. That's, we were talking about way forwards. That's a way forward. Bringing everyone together, and of course, museums have developed over the years good ways to establish provenance, even if sometimes it's not possible. And they have the expertise, sometimes more than the art market dealers, and it's a way forward. Totally, I fully agree and fully support this kind of project and collaboration. It's essential to our work, and it's essential to the art markets as well. If you want to stop being qualified as a dubious or gray market, initiative like that, make sure that your reputation is one of someone trying to participate in the fight against illicit trafficking in general.
Thanks a lot for all those comments, and thank you also everyone for the questions. Maybe it is time for me now to give also the floor to my ANCHISE colleagues. Maybe Irene or Marco, would you like to share some ideas or?
If I may, I will just take the occasion to invite you all. I've sent you some links for the chat, inviting you all to connect with us on social media and to our website. I see that there are many questions going around so many different topics, but the ANCHISE project is delving into quite a lot of them. So find all our resources, find all our previous webinars on our website, on our YouTube. Have a look, and I'm sure you will find something that will interest you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Irene, would you like also to take the floor?
Thank you very much all for attending. I do not have remarks because, as Marco said, you are more than welcome to find our resources. And sadly, we're running out of time today, but please join us for future events, future webinars. They will not be hosted by the same people, sadly. We have to give the floor to everyone. But thank you for everything, Marine and Benjamin. It was, of course, thrilling. And yes, join us for more fun in the following webinars. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Benjamin, and see you very soon.
Thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.